Hello, Abigail here with the astrology for Gemini season. The season is definitely more fluid. It's a mutable sign, it's an air sign, it is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury will be in Gemini for a good portion of this cycle. And it does feel nice and fluid. I do want to kind of make sure that we are honest and upright about this. There are some difficulties. But for 2026, this is one of the better seasons. So that is something to look forward to, and I don't want us to under celebrate it. But also, we will have the sun squaring the nodes, which can give things an eclipsey vibe, especially that first Sagittarius full moon, um, as well as kind of getting that impact of everything conjunct Uranus and trine, trine Saturn, and then not trine Saturn, trine Pluto, and then sextile Saturn and Neptune. So just be aware that that is what is kind of going on overarching in the sky. Meanwhile, there's actually a lot of really lovely stuff happening. We have the Venus Jupiter conjunction. Um, Things are starting to move, especially if you've been working on stuff in the season. But we are also preparing for Cancer season in a sense where we do get a Mercury retrograde and we do get Jupiter moving signs, and might be also in Cancer season. Let me check my notes. Me doing my research and then being like, wasn't enough research. Let me go and see. I want to see when the nodes move. Okay, so the lunar nodes, so they do move in Leo season. Okay, so not quite yet in Cancer season do we get the lunar nodes moving, but we do have big shifts in Cancer season. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind that like we're also prepping to kind of kick back into a little more gnarly astrology. I do think this isn't quite the same kind of gnarly as the beginning of the year, so we're still getting progress, but this is definitely the point where we start to hit retrogrades, and we're going to have to go back and kind of revisit a lot of the earlier transit, which can really feel like we're not making progress, but is basically us stabilizing in order to move forward. So a little reframe is a good idea. Anyways, we are going to go through the dates and kind of the major things. Obviously, we're not going to go through every single aspect. That would be insane. And also, I do weekly videos for that. But we're going to go through kind of the major events of this season. So, starting off, this starts on May 20th. We get Gemini season. We move into this mutable sign. Like I said, this year, so the way Mercury works is it's basically tied to the Earth by orbit. Well, yeah, tied like it's close to the Earth in orbit. So it's never super far off. So it's not unusual to have Mercury, in um, Gemini during Gemini season, just like it's not unusual to have Mercury in Taurus during Gemini season or Venus or otherwise. But we do get it for like half of the season, and having a domicile Mercury makes things nice. And while Mercury in Cancer isn't as quick or as fast, I do find that Mercury in Cancer is a nice emotional shift. Um, it's kind of for me like a nice neutral place of kind of exploring exploring feelings and kind of shifting, from that kind of intense energy of the mercurial domicile, go, 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 constant thinking into more of like a dream state almost. So it is going to be nice. We get to get a lot done at the beginning of Gemini season. And then as we move towards that retrograde, we get to kind of dig deeper into our emotions and our feelings, but in a way that is dynamic and flexible. So I do love that kind of the energy we get to experience in this season, and I think it's going to be helpful for what we have to do. The first major event that we have is going to be on May 31st, and that is the Sagittarius full moon. I am excited for these mutable moments. I think, like I said, the only tricky thing is that, especially the early degree moon, while it's not tight, it is tight-ish. And so that is going to, in my opinion, obviously you can disagree if you're a fellow astrologer, but in my opinion, that is going to feel very eclipse-like, and it's going to bring up the eclipse themes, not only the eclipse themes that we experienced back in spring, well, not spring, back in the winter or late winter. We're going to experience more of what we were experiencing back in the fall. So Virgo season, whatever is going on there is going to feel very present. But I also think it's an opportunity to kind of finalize some things. So if you had a lot going on back in the fall and you still feel like there's, residual energy and stuff kind of continuing to overtake you, it's going to be a bit tense and tricky, but it is a chance to kind of be like, and we're closing this door. Now, we will have two more eclipses on the Pisces Virgo axis. One will be in the fall and one will be in the late winter again. But this is the ending of the nodes being in a mutable sign for like another 4.5 years. Yeah, another like 4.5 years. So this is it's actually kind of a nice moment of kind of tying things up in Gemini season, which then allows us to kind of fully shift forward. Um, and a lot of my clients did have a lot going on in the fall, so I am looking forward to them feeling a bit more ease and a bit more forward motion as well as myself. So that's something to look forward to. I am digging through my notes to just see exactly how close the nodes are, and I do have loose nodal square in here. I'm pretty sure the nodes are like at like 3 degrees at this point or something, 2 to 3 degrees, and the full moon's at 9 degrees. And the major feature here is a Saturn sextile, so it does feel like there's a closing. It does feel like we're doing something in order to stabilize something, in order to rectify and kind of get something to a certain point and then move on, which is nice. I do think, the Mercury retrograde might pull us back a smidge and might be like, let's kind of, revisit certain emotions, but it definitely feels like Gemini and Cancer season, especially, are like the convergence of timelines where we're going to be having beginnings and endings all at once. So while it will have grief as an element, it's also, there's an excitement of being able to see the ending, but also be like, and now I can do this. Then on the 1st of June, sorry, my brain's a bit wishy-washy. I had a not great interaction with someone in a session, and so I'm still trying to stabilize. And it was a message from my guides to have better boundaries and to listen to my instincts. If you ever do client work in a metaphysical field, it will be a lesson that you will have to learn. And if you have, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, so we have Mercury moving into Cancer, which is what I was talking about. This is the halfway point, roughly, of the season. So we get into more watery energy. Like I said, it's not necessarily hyper functional in Cancer as a planet, but I personally am not anti Mercury and water signs. It's just like a different vibe. Even in Pisces, which as a Virgo rising can be difficult. I do appreciate and value the really deep, rich quality that Mercury and water signs can bring, and also the benefit to music and creativity and expression through things that are less tangible, like fiction or fantasy, is a really beautiful facet of Mercury and water signs. So yeah, to me, it's almost like Mercury and a water sign is like a different genre of book. Like Cancer might kind of just be straight up, fantasy and romance. And then Pisces is like a psychological, um, cosmic cosmic fantasy thriller. And then Scorpio Mercury's are like vampires, vampires and almost like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and stories that are why are my words slipping today? It's probably something with probably Neptune on my Venus. Um, what was the word I want? Kind of like allegories, where like we get to experience fantasy and all this richness, and then in Scorpio, it's like, and here's an allegory about real life because I'm a fixed sign. So I really do love a Mercury in Cancer. It allows me as a Mercury rising to kind of be a little more fluid in my thought. It also helps regulate my ADHD a bit. Not in the sense of me getting anything done, but in the sense of me kind of being a bit more chill about my thoughts. So it is something that I really enjoy, but we kind of get like the big one, which is on the 9th of June. We get the Venus Jupiter conjunction. This is kind of like every year the Venus Jupiter conjunction, or every however many months, because Venus's cycle is a little longer than a year. Um, you know, we get this Venus Jupiter conjunction, and it is in Cancer, which works well for Jupiter. And Venus, I quite enjoy in Cancer. I love a good Cancer Venus on, to be honest. Um, there, yes, can there be mother problems? Absolutely. But there is a tenderness and a desire to create belonging with Venus in Cancer and with Jupiter in Cancer. Also, remember that Jupiter rules immigrants and people who travel. And so I think, firstly, on the world stage, we'll be seeing some interesting stuff around things that have been going on in the world, if you catch my drift. But also, this is an opportunity, I think, to kind of see what the best possible outcome is. And they also do think that Jupiter does a lot of redirecting that we don't give them credit for. And so, if you are investing in a dream that it's not that it's not possible, but that isn't aligned with you, this Jupiter Venus conjunction will be telling you. And if you are like, if you have recently released, or even in the past released, dreams and desires that weren't aligned, you're going to get either an event that's going to happen that shows you an alignment, or that is a fulfillment of the manifestation, or you are going to be shown how it is possible and the direction to move forward. So this is beautiful. It's at 25 degrees of Cancer, so just check if you have any planetary connections. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I have a Mercury square, so that'll be interesting. Which is why I put in the little caveat of being like, it can also be a redirect. Because personally, in my experience, it will probably be. I don't think it's a redirect because I've done a lot of redirecting, but it's definitely going to be um, a kind of like a pointing me in the right direction versus necessarily like dreams come true. Now, if you have other things in your chart, like this is a conjunction, this very much points to an event happening that's very good for you. Moon conjunctions, Venus conjunctions, if you have anything in Cancer. With Mars, it's definitely kind of like marching orders and like how to get up and go. So, and with trines, it's also this energy of flow and ease. If you have squares, it's going to be more like my stuff, where it's going to be like, and here's how we can redirect and move forward. Doesn't mean good things aren't going to happen. It just means that there's probably, if you have a square involved, there's probably more information that you need, or more action required. That's just the nature of squares. But look for sextiles, look for squares, look for trines. Just remember how to identify them. Trines are elemental. So if you have something in a water trine and something's happening in another water trine, obviously it's based on closeness by degree, but there's a form of trine there. Squares are with the qualities of the sign, so mutable, cardinal, fixed. Any of those will be squared or opposition to each other. And sextile is one sign away. And this is for my dyslexic what's it called? Dyscalculia baddies, because I do not do well with degree, like doing everything by like, 180 degrees. Sextiles are one sign over. So if you have something in Taurus, then there's a little skip with Gemini, and then there's a plant something in Cancer. So that's how you identify the major aspects. And conjunction is technically not an aspect because it's 0 degrees, and that is right on top of it. And different astrologers have different opinions on orb. I tend to do a 5-degree orb and then a bigger degree orb for Pluto, and a lot of people fight me on this, but I also give the moon a pretty wide orb. That's because of my own personal experience. Technically, most astrologers give it a very tight orb because it moves so fast. Mine really depends on the situation. Anyways, off of the tangent and how to identify trines, squares, and sextiles. But we then also get Venus into Leo, which is interesting and dynamic because we go into the Pluto oppositions. And so we have the Pluto opposition. Definitely check where early degree Leo is in your chart, what house it's in, if there's any planets there, because this is a spot that has been getting a lot of pressure from Pluto since last year. And then even beyond that, when we had the retrogrades, when Pluto went in and then retrograded back. Excuse me. And so this spot is just getting pressurized anyways, and then we're going to have an activation as each planet moves through, and Jupiter is not far behind. So, I do think Venus and Leo is going to be fun and spicy. I do think also, and you can also check out AP Astrology, Anthony Parada Astrology, for more information on like fashion and trends. But I do, and a lot of astrologers agree, that Venus in Leo and then Jupiter in Leo and the extended stay of Jupiter in Leo with the South Node is going to bring a lot of exciting new things in fashion. It's also going to bring counterculture, which is going to be aided by the trines with Saturn and Neptune over in Aries. And so we're looking at a really big fashion boom coming up. We're looking at people pushing back against all of the beiges and the fascist nudes. It's not bad to hate to like enjoy nude and muted colors, but it is a sign of oppression when color is stripped from things because of colonialism and settler colonialism and racial violence. So I think we're also in Gemini season going to start to see some of the hints and the tingles of all the really fun, exciting new fashion stuff coming that is going to be more focused on um, handmade things and slower fashion. I also, personal opinion, I think we're going to see a big shift away from fast fashion. Now, obviously, it's not going to be everyone because the less money we have, the more appealing fast fashion is. But I do think over time and with how things, well, we're just not going to have any money. People are going to be turning to repurposing and upcycling and handcrafts and also with AI, the value of things made by human hands is a big theme of Jupiter and Leo, of Venus and Leo. Um, Also, if you think about it, in the past like 4 years, we've had a lot of Venus Leo activity and a lot of Mercury Leo activity. We've had the Mercury retrogrades, we had the Venus retrograde in Leo a couple years ago. We're also going to get a partial Mars retrograde at the end of this year. It's going to start in Virgo, which most of these retrogrades have as well, the Venus and the Mercury ones, and then head into Leo, the later degrees of Leo. So this is kind of an exciting time, and the Venus, while Venus is like time in Leo is not super long, I think its entrance into Leo in this Gemini season are going to kind of give us the preview of what is to come. Also, we're going to see people returning back to crafts and craftsmanship. Um, as a stark contrast, we are going to see and continue to see capitalism and corporations push homogeny and push mass production, but people are starting to fight back. And Jupiter and Leo is individuality. It is kind of like uniqueness on steroids. And Gemini is also a sign that pushes individuality. Well, not really individuality, it pushes uniqueness in its own way that creates a sense of individuality. If you've ever met a Gemini with a lot of Gemini placements, they are very like one of a kind. They do not fit in, like they don't kind of blend into the crowd. So that's kind of the energy this is giving, which yeah, we have the Pluto opposition, which I think is just highlighting kind of us against a greater power, and it is going to be testy, especially for people's relationships and love lives specifically. But I do think it's also an opportunity to fight back, to push back, to investigate and dig into our relationship dynamics, why we do things the way we do them, and how we can better things going forward. So honestly, I really love this point. We also, the very next day, so that's on the 13th, on the very next day, on the 14th, we get the Gemini new moon, which is a little moment of its own. I really am excited for it because, I really think we can all benefit from a nice fresh Gemini moment. And because of the way the planets are lined up, these moons are kind of like the Sagittarius full moon and the Gemini new moon. They're kind of more isolated in the astrology. So we're really focused in on the sign of Gemini, focused in on the signs of Gemini and Sagittarius with the full moon. And so there is a bit of clarity in the simplicity here because things are so locked in. Also, this Gemini new moon will be ruled by a Cancer Mercury. So I think there's a real opportunity to take the dynamism of Gemini and turn it into emotional dynamism and like an emotional ability to kind of function in a more diverse and a variety of ways, which I think is a way that a lot of us are going to need to start to act in order to survive if we're not already. The only real, I'm going to obviously break this down when the time comes, but the only like major aspect here is to Chiron, which Chiron is very soon, in a couple of days, to be leaving Taurus for the first time. It will retrograde back, and then in 2027 finally go back into Taurus for its extended stay. But it is kind of the final goodbye to Chiron and Chiron will be at 29 degrees. So it's a very testy point. And so I think there's going to be a lot of kind of acceptance and appreciation for not for the pain and trauma we've been through, but for our ability to negotiate and survive. And while there's obviously a pain in there, there's also, I think, a great, beautiful measure, and makes me want to tear up, of like pride in how far you've come, pride and honor and value in seeing the ways in which you have and your body has created systems in order for you to make it through, and what you have been able to attain in spite of what you have experienced is, I think, going to be a really beautiful theme for this new moon. Then, as I said, on the 19th, we get Chiron in Taurus, and it entered into Aries in 2018. So think back on the kind of progression of this story and where you were in 2018. And then it's going to, do the whole retrograde thing, like I said, finally go in fully in 2027, and then it'll be there till 2034. So it is a decently long transit. It does kind of, it doesn't necessarily have a strict transit. It kind of fluctuates depending on which sign it's in and how fast and how slow it's moving. So it's not necessarily an exact number of years for Chiron. It's kind of like ballparked based on the sign, the cycle, the timing. Um, so yeah, and that's going to be a really big shift. I know not all astrologers work with Chiron, but Chiron has been screaming at me from my chart from day one. The minute I learned about Chiron, I was like, everything makes sense. So I do think there's a big shift in the psyche when it comes to psychology. I also think with Chiron and Taurus, we're going to have a lot more recognition around how Western like mental health practices and psychology and stuff is really rooted in colonialism, and it's also rooted in like how can you be the best object to function as a tool in capitalism versus what is actual physical health, what is actual mental health, what are the ways not to just help you survive, but ways in which to fix the world, very Taurus, fix the world and the world around you, and to create systems and structures that support you rather than viewing the individual as the problem. Which I think, obviously, when we move into a transit, you can feel that change happening before it fully shifts. And I think, especially this year, we're going to start to see that change big time. And just people recognizing that, like, oh, it's not me, it's the system. And while we have to find ways to work within the system, um, we don't have to carry the responsibility, and no one should, because it's not an individual's fault that the world is the way it is. And so I think we're looking at more collective healing. I think we're looking at more environmental healing, not just the environment, but also how the environment that we are in affects us and our mental health and our body and the psychology of trauma and pain. Um, I also unfortunately do think we're going to have the conversation again about corporal punishment when it comes to us as a society. And I'm not looking forward to that, but it is something that's going to come up. And you're going to see a lot of people, like, while a lot of people have progressed and moved past that kind of punishment for children, we're going to see people trying to bring that back into schools, into acceptability in family lives. We're also going to see tons and tons of stuff about children and children's rights. So yeah, just keep that in mind. It's a pretty big shift. Like I said, it's not officially over and settled until 2027, but it's definitely big new energy that, while it may not kind of have like a flashing light in like the general public and consciousness, it is one of those things that for me I see really pulls the undercurrents of movements and ideals and things. And every single transit has two sides. It has the side of like progress and collective emotion and healing, and then we have to look at the other side, which is the opposite, which is people trying to control and to oppress people using this energy. So keep that in mind. There is never a good or bad transit. It is what people do with them. And then last but not least, it's the sun moving into Cancer on the 21st of June. So that is Gemini season. It is a really dynamic season. I think it's going to be real interesting. I also sense, I'm just kind of like, I'm in like a channeling psychic level. I also sense that a lot of people are going to be meeting new people, which is not unusual for Gemini season, especially if we're talking the northern hemisphere, um, just because of the weather is summer. But it is definitely kind of like a time when like it seems and feels easier to invite and welcome new energy in our lives. There's more capacity for change. So I would encourage you to embrace that and to enjoy it. Recognizing that 2026 is kind of a rough year. And the years around Pluto moving into a sign and then the few years after are always especially rough. So we're going to find a way through it. We're going to hold on to each other. We're going to use our tools and we are going to grow and stretch and find healthy coping mechanisms. But just know that if you're feeling a bit run down and burnout, it's it's because of Pluto and also the Earth, which is the perennial joke online. Um, but yeah, I would encourage you, especially like embrace the 9th of June as that, Venus Jupiter conjunction can be a real turning point, especially if you're conscious of it. If you are someone who is having relational issues or who is in a relationship and things are going well or who is single, this is some kind of turning point where things will be different than they have been, or you will be shown how things are going to be different. I will say, if you are in an unhealthy relationship, this Jupiter Venus conjunction is going to make that unbearable. If you are with someone who is healthy and you're just struggling with external problems, this is a beautiful moment of coming together and finding a way forward and recognizing each other's needs is really beautiful. And if you're single, this is actually a really great opportunity, especially if you have been working on boundaries, if you've been working on, kind of listening to the universe and your guides and kind of finding a path forward. This is a really beautiful time. Not necessarily that has to be down to the day of meeting someone, but like an opening of like a portal of time when maybe finding someone is easier. So I would encourage you to be out and about around this time. Everyone's chart's different, everyone's journey is different. There's no guarantee, but why not take the energy and use it to connect and to find new people? And regardless of whether it ends up being your ultimate goal or not, you actually like getting exactly what you want, it's definitely taking you much further down the path of you getting what you want. Thing just flew into my hair. Yeah, I've been currently battling with those fun little gnats that like to live in plant bowls. I have to brew a concoction of cinnamon water, which works really well, and spray them, but every so often one of them flies into my face as he flew right by. So embrace the season, enjoy the fluidity of it. Know that there are difficulties, but know that this does feel a bit better, and there are a lot more solutions at hand. Unlike kind of in the winter when it was like, oh, this sucks and there are no solutions. We're just gonna have to ride this out. This one, it's like, oh, it sucks. What are our options? Which honestly is better to me, at least with how I cope with the world. Anyways, my loves, this is the overall energy and astrology of Gemini season. I wish you many blessings. I also wish you the gifts of Jupiter and Venus during this season, and I will see you all later.